Welcome to Golden State with Mates post-game live in what may have been the funnest, most entertaining preseason game in history that I can remember anyway. Not to mention the competitive nature of it. The Golden State Warriors basically steal a victory over the Sacramento Kings to maintain their unbeaten record, now 4-0 in preseason. Stephen Curry, what more can you say about this man? We didn't need a reminder of his brilliance. We didn't need a reminder of his scoring potency and his ability to chuck up threes and score points after points in a very short period of time. But he had 14 points with less than 5 minutes remaining in this game. Ends up with a 30-piece and caps that off with a three over De'Aaron Fox with 5 seconds remaining to give the Warriors a 116-115 victory. As I said, we didn't need a reminder, right? It's preseason, but this guy is 35 years old and still looking somewhere near his prime form. I actually thought his first half was pretty disappointing, but my goodness, like, what more can you say? What more can you honestly say? So looking forward to reading your comments and thoughts regarding this game. If you are in the live stream, then please comment and let me know your thoughts, and I'll read them out as it goes on here. But the first real major dress rehearsal, Steve Kerr did say after the previous game against the Kings on Sunday that this would be, the first major dress rehearsal for the Warriors this preseason and going into obviously opening night tip off against the Phoenix Suns next Tuesday, which is obviously now less than a week away. Obviously, it wasn't quite, I guess, full go, given that Kevon Looney joined Draymond Green on the sideline. So it left the Golden State front court quite undermanned. And we saw a different starting lineup as a result, with both Jonathan Kuminga and Trace Jackson Davis getting the start, which also, and probably one of the big points from the game, also pushed Chris Paul back to the bench for the first time in his Warrior career, albeit it was only his third game tonight. But this was a game where, the Warrior, Steve Kerr only went 10 deep, right? And even with a couple of those, like Moses Moody, I think played 7 minutes in this one. Corey Joseph was also part of the 10-man rotation. He played 9 minutes. So this was a game where, Steph plays 30 and plays 31. Clay plays 31. Wiggins plays 30. Paul and Kuminga play 29. This was as close to what you're going to see from the Warriors as you could possibly get. Obviously, taking into account the absence of Looney and Draymond. What did I make of the starting lineup? I was very happy with it. Yes, you want it to be a dress rehearsal, but I still think there's room to give young players opportunity, and that's what Steve provided in this one, starting both Kuminga and Jackson Davis, which was a surprise, but I like it. I had an article on Blue Man Hoop earlier this morning, American time, Pacific time, basically talking about the fact that I actually think Kuminga should start the opening of the regular season. Sorry. I get the whole Chris Paul thing. I do. I just think that minus the kind of veteran experience and the playmaking, Draymond and JK are more of a similar comp than obviously going from Draymond to CP3. So the fact that he got the start over Chris Paul today was glorious. It really was. And then obviously Jackson Davis taking his opportunity with Looney's absence. We'll start with him, right? Because I could talk about Steph for the next half an hour, but you don't need to, right? You know what you're going to get from Stephen Curry. And we saw it again tonight. 16 points in the final 5 minutes. Absolute brilliance, genius. He is the engine that keeps this team running. What are we going to do without him? Well, a couple of the young guys, I guess, tonight showed that, hey, there might be a future for the Warriors beyond Stephen Curry. Hopefully that's not for, half a decade or more still. But Jackson Davis, probably the biggest element maybe to this game, aside from Curry's brilliance in the last 5 minutes. 13 point, 10 rebound, double-double. Matched up against an all-star in Domantas Sabonis. And I don't think you could have asked for much more, to be honest. I thought some of his defensive work on Sabonis. Now, Sabonis had 12 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists. Like, it was a good game. But in terms of what Jackson Davis was able to do defensively, in terms of bottling Sabonis up at the rim on a few occasions, making things as difficult as possible for him, I don't think you could have asked for much more. Now, offensively, it's quite incredible, really. The fact that with less than 5 minutes remaining in this game, before Steph found his rhythm and absolutely exploded, the Warriors leading shot takers in this game, in a game where, as I've described, it was a dress rehearsal where, the main players were playing 30-plus minutes. The leading shot takers were Jonathan Kuminga and Trayce Jackson Davis. Both had 14 field goal attempts with less than 5 minutes remaining to lead Golden State. I thought his ability to put himself in position, he had a couple of fantastic baseline dunks in the fourth quarter, including an and one that he didn't cap off at the free throw line, but still really impressive. His positioning on both ends of the floor. Now, he could have made a few that he missed, a few bunnies at the rim. I mean, the fact is that he shot 6 for 14 from the field, which for a center where all his shot attempts came in the paint and around the rim, that's slightly disappointing, I suppose. But I don't think that's there are some layups there and stuff like that he's going to finish in time, right? Give him just a little bit more NBA experience and he's finishing those. So this is in 6 months' time, you could see, or not even 6 months' time, 2 months' time, 3 months' time, you could see a game like this where, maybe Loon's out or whatever, and Jackson Davis does get the start and maybe he plays 24 minutes like he did. And this might have actually been a 20-point, 10-rebound, double-double. That's just think about the fact that he makes 3 of, his missed layups around the rim, and all of a sudden he's got 19 points. He makes the free throw that he had, and he gets the 20. That's how good this game was from Trayce Jackson Davis. You can't speak highly enough about it. And honestly, so it's going to look a lot different, obviously, because you're going to have Loon come back and you're going to have Draymond come back. And the other point was Saric was really impressive, particularly in the first half. The offensive versatility that he gives you, I've been speaking about it all off season. It's not a surprise by any means, but it's still fantastic to see it come into fruition on the floor with how much of a perfect fit he is for the Warriors in that second unit. And he played a lot in the first unit as well. They ended up closing with Steph, CP, Clay, Wiggs, and then Saric at the 5 because Jackson Davis did have some late foul trouble. I'm not sure if they would have gone to Saric if it wasn't for the foul trouble for Jackson Davis, who ended up with 5 fouls. Maybe they would have anyway, just given the experience that Saric provides. Because this was a game where both teams were trying to win, right? Like the Kings had their main guys going down the stretch, as did the Warriors. This was probably a more competitive preseason game than I've ever seen. Really, both teams were really having at it. But Jackson Davis, among all the kind of veteran players on the floor, really held his own. Defensively, as I spoke about, positioning-wise, being able to make things as difficult for Sabonis as possible, who, still played a reasonable game, but I thought there were a couple of foul calls on Jackson Davis and Steve. I've actually just finished listening to Steve's press conference. He alluded to the fact there were a couple of calls there on TJD that were rookie calls, basically, that a couple of years into the league and, they're not calling fouls on those. I know there was one, and Fitz on the broadcast was huge on it, where I think it was Keegan Murray came down the lane, made a little kind of floater kind of thing, and they called it was an and one. They called a foul on Jackson Davis, and he went straight up. It wasn't a foul, and that's just kind of the rookie calls, right? And we've seen it, regularly. We've seen it with Kuminga over his first 2 seasons. You're kind of young and inexperienced, and the refs just don't really give you the respect that you may deserve, right? But look, there's some things with his lack of size, I suppose, where there were a couple of times where Fox made layups over him, where a taller player, right? I think the Warriors listed him at 6'8" on the training camp roster. If he's 6'11", close to 7 foot, he's probably blocking those shots. But for a 57th overall pick to come in and potentially have the impact that he's going to have for the Warriors this season, again, is it that much of a surprise given he's had 4 years of college at Indiana, given that he's 23 years of age? Is it that much of a surprise? Maybe not, but still, again, to see it in real time on the floor, the kind of two-way impact that he can have. And, there's plenty of, polishing and refinement to his game to come. So, there's improvement certainly there. Little doubt about that. But he's working himself to a point where he's going to have to play in the rotation. Like, he's just going to have to, particularly early when Draymond is probably, I mean, you probably don't want Draymond playing too much at the 5 early when he comes back. To try and, I mean, having to defend big men isn't necessarily going to be the worst thing for your ankle, but I don't think it's ideal either. I suppose you might want him more in the interior rather than testing that ankle out on the perimeter more. I don't know. But I still don't think you want him battling and bumping in the post kind of thing too much early when he returns. So, we're going to see different lineups here where there's a combination of Jackson Davis, Saric, Green, Looney. I actually thought that particularly early, the kind of Saric Jackson Davis combination was pretty good. I think Saric is clearly skilled enough and smart enough to play at the 4 next to whoever, whether it's Jackson Davis, Draymond, Looney, whoever it is. Although he's probably the 5 next to Draymond anyway. But he's got the skills and smarts, and I think Jackson Davis has the smarts, at least. He doesn't have necessarily the skill. Like, he's probably not going to find the passes that Saric does. He's clearly not able to extend out any further than the paint in terms of his scoring. But again, just knowing where to be on both ends of the floor, it's a wild contrast to what we've seen from Warrior big men in the past. And you look at Jackson Davis tonight, right, compared to JaVale McGee. And I tweeted out in the fourth quarter, it was quite funny. I tweeted out that, the Warriors, I think, would be pretty happy that JaVale ended up choosing the Kings over them. There were reports that the Warriors were interested in JaVale McGee after he was bought out or waived by the Mavericks. As soon as I tweeted out, literally the next possession, he closed out on a Saric 3, blocked it, and then ran down in transition for a dunk. It was quite funny, just the fact that the timing of it. But aside from that, I thought JaVale wasn't great. I thought that there was some Shackton moments, right? There was a play, I think, early in the first quarter where he just had the ball at the top of the perimeter. Saric put a little bit of pressure on him, and he just fumbled the ball out of bounds. There was a play defensively where he just completely lost Dario in the first quarter. Clay kind of got double teamed a bit. JaVale was just absolutely nowhere, and Saric had an open 3. So the fact that you could have possibly had JaVale McGee, but maybe there's some credit that's got to go to the Warrior front office, because I've been big on, we need another big. The Warriors need another big. Well, maybe they just knew what they had in Trayce Jackson Davis, and maybe fans and analysts should have given more respect and more appreciation to the fact that Jackson Davis could possibly play and impact the Warriors this season, because based on this early preseason form, I think he can. Now, again, is it going to be in a bigger role as he had tonight? Absolutely not. Like, Draymond and Loon are going to come back. There are going to be plenty of nights where he's out of the rotation. We get that. But there's something there. There's something there. And there's also enough elements of improvement to think that, hey, he's not just a guy that's going to have short-term impact. He could also develop into something more meaningful in the future. So probably the biggest element, I think, out of this win was Trayce Jackson Davis. A few, the rest of the starters, Kuminga. Kuminga, he's so fun to watch. He's so entertaining because he just does stuff. He just does so much stuff on the floor. And I mean, within the first 4 minutes of the game, he had 6 points on 3-3 shooting. He had a steal. He had 2 turnovers, which there was probably a third that may have been his responsibility to, or at least he contributed to. And there are a couple of horrible defensive plays, including one where he just jumped out inexplicably at De'Aaron Fox, who then blew by him and got to the rim kind of thing. He just does so much stuff. Like he's just always, and that's good. That is good because majority of it is great. And the further he goes, the further experience he gains, the more he plays. The bad stuff will get refined, and then it'll be slowly get eliminated. And that's what we're seeing, right? That is what we're seeing. And I just think we're at a point now where Steve, I think, can trust him to the point where, like, he's going to make mistakes. He's probably going to make more mistakes than everyone else, possibly. But what he brings on the positive side is just, at the moment, is just outweighing the bad stuff. And I think that's the most important thing. What he brings on the positive aspects are stuff that the Warriors just don't have in terms of his ability to get to the rim, his ability to just simply overpower and outsize opposition defenders. He's just such a fun. He's probably my most enjoyable player to watch right now. And again, that might be a bit harsh or disrespectful towards Steph because we just got a reminder that, again, we didn't need, but it was enjoyable nonetheless. The fact that he, just goes and wins the game for the Warriors in the final 5 minutes. But right now, Jonathan Kuminga, just seeing his development and his growth is the most exciting thing about the Warriors right now. There's little doubt about that. And he just does so much stuff. It's fun to watch. It really is. And he played well again overall, like 18 points, 6 rebounds, 7 of 14 shooting, 2 of 5 from 3. The shot's getting to a point where I think it's going in every time he shoots it. And even a couple of the misses that he had in this one, I don't think were overly bad. 5 turnovers again. He had a couple of nice feeds. He only had 2 assists. I remember he had a nice feed to a Steph open corner 3 that Steph blew in the third quarter. But overall, another positive game. Again, I think he should be in the starting lineup opening night, particularly with, we'll get into Chris Paul in a second. That worked. Andrew Wiggins, just quickly mention him. We'll go through basically every player that played, and even some that didn't play here. Efficient. 16 points, 3 assists, a steal, a block, 7 of 10 shooting. Interesting thing to me was, like, a lot of Wiggins last season, if you saw that kind of box score with 10 shot attempts, you would have thought, half of them probably threes. No, 1 of 2 from 3. And it was generally, that was the kind of way Golden State were playing and how the Kings were defending, where this was a kind of un-Warrior-like performance in a lot of ways. They had 21 threes at the end of the third quarter. They averaged over 43 last season. Now, there's different things that play into that. There's the way the Kings were defending them, trying a few different things offensively in terms of, post-up opportunities for Wiggins and Kuminga, which was more prominent against the Kings on Sunday, but was still prominent early in this one with both of them in the starting lineup. There's the Chris Paul factor, although CP went 3 for 3 from deep today. It was just a weird kind of, just the way the Warriors were trying to get their offense was a little bit different. I don't mind it, but obviously for the first 3 quarters didn't particularly work. They ended up shooting 16 for 31, over 50% from 3. But again, 31 attempts is incredibly low for what we saw for the majority of last season. Back on Wiggins, though, I just think that, and again, it's been a big thing for me, like some of his individual shot making in the second quarter, in the fourth quarter, was just huge. And like, he needs to be taking more shots, in my opinion. So if you look at the kind of distribution of shots, so Jackson Davis and Kuminga both have 14. Steph gets going late, has 18, 10 of 18, 8 of 12 from deep. And then Clay and Wiggs both have 10. I think Wiggs needs to take more shots than Clay, and I'll get to Clay in a second. But I think Wiggs needs to take more shot attempts than Clay Thompson. I think there's little doubt about that. He's just a better scorer, really. He's just a more efficient scorer right now. And I've been speaking about it all off season. Can the Warriors dive into Andrew Wiggins scoring a little bit more than what they have in the last 2 seasons, where he's averaged around 17 points per game? And he has a lot of these nights where he's 16 points on 7 of 10 shooting. And you kind of just ask yourself, couldn't you have found an extra 3 or 4 shots for him and get him to, 20, 22, 24 points? I don't know. I think it's maybe partly Wiggs and maybe a lack of aggression, although, again, a lot of his, plays today were give him the ball and let him make his own offense rather than necessarily the catch and shoot stuff, which has been so prominent with him over the last couple of seasons and generally in his whole career with the Warriors, which has been so efficient. Don't get me wrong, and we don't want him to fall back into the Minnesota days, but again, some of his mid-range stuff was really impressive. So again, a good game. Defensively, he's still not what he was, going back to the 2022 championship run. It's preseason. Draymond out clearly hurts that because you just don't have a second line of defense, a help defender behind you, which is, a safety blanket of sorts in Draymond. Like, it's just so underrated, that part of his game. Clay. I mean, do we need to get concerned? Do we need to get concerned about Clay Thompson? 5 points, 2 of 10, 1 of 4. He just couldn't get open today. Like, he had, again, we've kind of heard all offseason about how good he looks athletically and physically. Obviously, a further time removed from the 2 major injuries. He couldn't get open. Like, he was, running off screens. It was, usual Clay Thompson stuff. There's something wrong there. There is something fundamentally wrong. He hasn't shot the ball well at all in any of these 4 games that he's played. This was probably the worst. 2 of 10, 1 of 4. Like, that was ugly. In fact, I'd also tweet out the Steph Clay first half where they combined for 8 points on 3 of 12 shooting with 5 turnovers. That might have been the worst half. I couldn't remember a worse half of basketball from the Splash Brothers combined than that first half. And obviously Steph comes on and ends up winning the game. Absolutely unreal. But Clay was just as bad as the first half. Just as bad in the second half as he was in the first half. Now, 7 rebounds. I think he's making a more conscious effort of getting on the defensive glass, which is good because he's going to have to, particularly in those like closing lineups where Chris Paul and Steph are next to him as well, and he's playing at the 3. So I like that. That's good. 4 assists. I mean, I liked a couple of his passes. So he had that one I talked about before with Saric, but I mean, if you didn't find that pass, then you're doing something wrong. Like, I don't think that was anything majorly positive. He passed out of a double team to a wide open man on the perimeter. Like, cool. Well done. I did like the one to Jackson Davis. Was that in the third or I think that might have been in the 4th quarter, I believe, where he was kind of got to about the free throw line, could have taken an open mid-range jumper, ended up finding a rolling Jackson Davis, for the dunk. That was a nice play. But overall, I mean, we're not really going to get overly concerned, are we, until the regular season starts. But if he does have a poor start to the regular season, then that's just going to be confirmation of what we've seen in the preseason. And then you might be having to have questions on, who does get pushed back to the bench. And, does Clay need to be in that conversation rather than Chris Paul? I don't know. Let's talk about CP3 for a second. Thought he just got better as the game went on, really. 13 points, 6 rebounds, 9 assists, 4 of 6 shooting, 3 of 3 from deep. Got to the free throw line late in that third quarter for a pair of free throws. 3 turnovers, plus 9 in the game, which was an equal team high along with Wiggins. I thought he was really good, and that's a major positive. That's a major positive, the fact that he came off the bench and looked like Chris Paul. Like, it's pretty simple, isn't it? Like, it's not rocket science. Like, it's still playing basketball at the end of the day. You are out there playing, but, like, some players, it's just, and we saw it with Jordan Poole. Just quick shout out, Jordan Poole, 41 points today for the Wizards against the Knicks, including 29 in the first half. Absolutely huge. Well done to him. Like, that's great. I'm not trying to sound facetious there or sarcastic there. Like, genuinely happy for him. Hope he has a great season. And we'll continue to follow that. But we saw with him last season that, the production between starting and coming off the bench was wildly different. And now Chris Paul comes in and it's one game, yes, but he comes off the bench and it's Chris Paul. 13 points, 6 rebounds. Again, I think like Clay doing a pretty good job at being, conscious of getting on the glass and helping out for a team that is obviously undersized. I like that. 9 assists, a couple of uncharacteristic turnovers early, but I thought he got better as the game went on. The combination that he has with Saric is elite, and you can already tell that. I mean, this Warrior bench unit, and we've been saying it for the first 3 games already, but this Warrior bench unit is just going to be so much different, so much better than what we saw last season. Like, it is just night and day, the difference. When you've got Paul and you've got Saric out there, you're pretty much just with those two guys, you're pretty much going to have a pretty decent offense already, just with those two guys out there. And then you can throw in, we saw kind of in that second quarter, we saw Kuminga, we saw Wiggins. I was a little bit surprised that Gary Payton II was a part of that unit rather than Moody. And we'll get to some of the guys who played less and who didn't play at all. But Chris Paul, mate, like, he was probably if Jackson Davis is not the biggest positive, then Paul is. And Paul might actually be the biggest positive because he's going to have more impact on the Warriors season than Jackson Davis is. There's little doubt about that. So maybe that's the biggest positive to take away from this victory. Chris Paul looking incredibly good and looking incredibly good in a bench role. And he should only get better. So that's a great start. Saric's first half was absolutely unreal. He had 12 points, 5 rebounds, 2 steals, 2 assists in the first half in like 14 minutes. Ended up with 14, 6, 3, the 2 steals, 6 of 10. Just 1 of 5, but I don't really care. Like, he's going to nail his jumpers. Like, he's going to have nights like that. I actually thought he probably lost confidence a little bit. There are a couple of ones where he was wide open in kind of pick and pop situations at the top of the perimeter that he really just gave up and didn't take. And there are a couple of times I kind of screamed, like, just take him. Like, you're open, take him. Like, if he's going to get wide open jumpers at the top of the perimeter, like, I don't care if he takes 7 or 8 threes. Really, like, that's a good shot. He's a guy that should be shooting high 30s from 3-point range. And if you're getting wide open looks, take him. So he was 1 of 5. He probably should have taken a few more, even though he only made 1 of the 5. I think he's just such. I mean, he had some foul trouble defensively. I think Sabonis gave him a little bit of trouble. But again, he's not going to be necessarily playing once Loon and Dre are back. He's not necessarily going to be playing against starting level NBA centers. He's probably going to be up against backups. I like him as I spoke about before. I like him at the 4 a bit. I think that's okay, particularly with the defense that Jackson Davis and Loon and Dre obviously give you. He's just a perfect fit. He's a perfect Warrior fit. 3 turnovers, so he's not immune to that. He had a couple where he kind of pushed the envelope a little bit in terms of the passes that he was trying to make. Get those over and done with in preseason, I suppose. Payton, 17 minutes, 5 points, 4 rebounds, assist, a couple of steals, 2 of 4. Missed a couple at the rim that he probably should have made. We know what he is. And that's probably that's a standard Gary Payton II game. And we've just seen that throughout preseason. It's just like standard Gary Payton II. And you look down the line here, and there's some wildly contrasting performances that you could get from players, right? Like Clay has 5 in this game. Next game he could have 30. Jackson Davis is a young player. Kuminga is a young player. Wiggins' aggressiveness can, come and go. So really, when you're talking about the production that players are going to give you on a night-to-night basis, Gary Payton II is probably one of the most trustworthy players just in regard to what you're going to get from him, even if, the floor, the consistent production clearly isn't there as opposed to some of the other, players with higher upside like a Kuminga and maybe even Jackson Davis develops into that. Moody to an extent. I just want to talk about Moody. So he's probably the biggest, can I say, loser from this game? Aside from Clay obviously playing poorly, but Moody 7 minutes, 2 points, had a nice move to the rim in the second quarter against Keegan Murray, and I kind of looked at that straight away and thought that's why he probably should be getting some of these Payton minutes, because Payton's like not doing that, is he? But then there are a couple other defensive plays where Moody's getting blown by, and I thought, well, Payne's not allowing that, and that's why Steve wants to go to Payton a little bit more than Moody, maybe. But I did think, that second unit where it was kind of CP3, Payton, Wiggins, Kuminga, and Saric. I would have thought that Saric, Wiggins, and Chris give you enough experience and leadership kind of thing where you can probably have Moody and Kuminga out there at the same time with them. But it's a question mark now, isn't it? It's a real question mark because you're not necessarily going to have Moody's position isn't necessarily impacted directly by Draymond and by Loon, but you could see this is going to be a sliding, right, where those two guys slide in and maybe Wiggins moves down to the 3 more, which impacts Moody. Maybe Kuminga, with the way he's shooting at the moment, maybe he slides down to the 3 for a little bit. That impacts Moody. I don't know. We saw Corey Joseph for the first time. He had 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal. Standard, I suppose, what you kind of expect out of Corey Joseph, veteran point guard, steady presence, nothing to write home about, just solid. Not too many thoughts there, and he played 9 minutes. Solid game. I don't think he's necessarily a part of the rotation. I would ultimately, I think, it's tough. It's tough. This is like a deep Warriors team, right? Where Moody and Joseph are probably going to be pretty unlucky. They're going to have nights where they're DNPs or they play less than 5 minutes or whatever. Or even like tonight, like 9 minutes and 7 minutes. In a preseason game, like Steve went hard. He went hard, like 10-man rotation, and 2 of those guys played less than 10 minutes. Yeah, right. I like it, though. You see some of the guys that didn't play. Pajemski. Now, I feel like this must have been a case of, hey, let's give him the night off kind of thing, because he's actually had probably a more heavy workload than what you may have expected or whatnot in the first 3 games, particularly getting the start against the Kings on Sunday, where it was probably at times maybe he looked a little bit tired after 2 really impressive performances to begin with. They clearly wanted to give some minutes to Joseph as well. They clearly wanted to lift the minutes of Steph and CP, so he was the one that was kind of forced out in that respect. Do we see him? Well, it sounds like Steve's going to rest the main core again on Friday against the Spurs, so Pajemski will get his chance again. And right now, there's a genuine, you've got to kind of ask yourself whether he or Joseph are ahead in the rotation, and I don't think Joseph did anything to necessarily push ahead of Pajemski based on his 9 minutes. So he'll get his opportunity. I don't think you'd be necessarily too concerned. I'm actually more concerned with the fact Moody only got 7 minutes as opposed to Pajemski not playing at all. Because I still think this is a game where Moody realistically should have been getting 15 plus minutes, and he just didn't. I'm more concerned about that than I am about Pajemski not playing at all. The two-way guys didn't play. Garuba's so Garuba played, 5 minutes in game 1, played 3 minutes the other night against the Kings, and that's all, basically. Did he play in that second game against the Lakers? Just going back to it. No. No, not at all. So, interesting. Because I genuinely, I would have thought going into preseason that him and Jackson Davis would probably receive equal opportunity to try and work out who is going to be that kind of fourth big behind Loon, Dre, and Saric. And it's clearly just been Jackson Davis. It's not even close now. I thought it was going to be 50-50. No, it's Jackson Davis all the way. And Steve, maybe he just had an impressive training camp and Garuba's maybe struggled a little bit. I don't know. Steve spoke pretty glowingly when he was asked about Garuba in a press conference last week. So, yeah, that's probably the one of the strangest ones for me from preseason is the fact that Garuba hasn't played more. Now, yes, he's coming from a poor organization in the last 2 seasons in the Rockets or the last few seasons. But he's played 100 NBA games. He's got experience. Clearly, the experience of Jackson Davis at college is more worthwhile to Steve right now than Garuba. Just something to monitor going forward. I find it, it's interesting. Quinones didn't play after his impressive performance on Sunday. That was no surprise. I spoke about that in that post-game live, that he should have got more opportunity to show his wares. And now that he didn't get that opportunity where he should have played 30 minutes on Sunday rather than 24, should have got more on ball opportunity. And now that he didn't get that, he just won't get the opportunity again. Really, he's gonna he and Garuba and Jerome Robinson, if he maintains on a 2-way contract, they're just really going to play it. Santa Cruz. I did see an article. I don't know. Can't remember who it was. There was an article kind of interviewing Jerome Robinson and interviewed Steve Kerr about Jerome Robinson. I apologize. I forgot who wrote it. But I did see that. And that was kind of talking about how the fact that Robinson could come in and play a role. I mean, I just couldn't disagree anymore. Glad that he didn't play. I don't want to sound like a hater or anything, but he was really poor against the Kings. I'm glad he didn't play. Anything else here? Rudy Gay. So, what's going on there? There's clearly going to be a 14th roster spot. We're a couple of days from that, basically, a few days from that. And I've just thought it's going to be Rudy Gay the whole time. But again, hasn't played. Didn't play against the Kings on Sunday. Didn't play tonight. What are we doing there? I don't know. So Javonte Green comes in. Just having a look at a comment here. Hansolo Dolo. Rumors that the Golden State Warriors are targeting Miles Turner. Do you need Miles Turner when you got Trace Jackson Davis? I mean, completely different players, and yet Miles Turner's a fantastic starting caliber NBA player. But I'm certainly, with what Jackson Davis has produced, with the kind of confirmation of what Saric can bring, I'm pretty comfortable with where the Warriors are at with their big man rotation, to the point where I'm complaining a little bit by the lack of playing time for Garuba. So, I mean, I don't even know what you give up for Miles Turner, who has been on the trade block for a long time in Indiana, but is actually, the Pacers are now going to be pretty good this season. And so I think they're actually going to want to keep him. And I think the kind of offensive versatility with his 3-point shooting that he provides next to Halliburton, Benedict Mathurin, Bruce Brown comes in as kind of a Swiss Army knife. They're going to be good this season. Not to mention the shot blocking that Miles Turner provides, which the Warriors, it'd be more about, getting someone like Miles Turner would be more about the genuine shot blocking that he would give you rather than necessarily the 3-point shooting, because Saric can obviously provide that. I mean, yeah, the Warriors had how many blocks? Hansolo Dollar says my return would be a good pickup. maybe reconfigure your comment there. I'm not particular. I'm assuming you're stating he would be a good pickup. I mean, he's a very good player. He would be a good pickup, but anyway. Anything else here? I don't think that I've got too much else to say. So the final game, preseason game for the Warriors is against the Spurs. Hopefully we see Victor Wembanyama on Friday because, oh my goodness. There couldn't have been any more expectation on Wemby, but he may have surpassed it. I don't know if you've seen his little dribble through the legs of an opponent today playing against the Rockets. Some of he's just ridiculous. He's ridiculous. And the Spurs are going to be good. Like not playoff good, maybe not even playing good, but they might surprise some teams. They beat the Rockets today. Rockets minus a heap of guys. They didn't have Jalen Green. Didn't have Fred VanVleet, I don't think, played. So they were missing some guys. But, I mean, the Spurs, like, Devin Vassell had 25 in the first half. Sohan's playing point, which is just interesting, but I love it. Keldon Johnson's like an $80 million player who's now almost been relegated to, I mean, your fourth best player, I suppose, behind Sohan, Vassell, and Wemby. Spurs are interesting. Looking forward to seeing them play on Friday. Really am. But other than that, I'll give it another 30 seconds here. But other than that, not too much else to say on what was a really fun preseason game. Warriors 4-0 now. How much do you buy into it? I think there's some special stuff going on with this team, as special as it can be based on preseason, obviously. But the biggest takeaways, the biggest positives, no doubt, Chris Paul coming off the bench and playing well. Trace Jackson-Davis looking like he could be a genuine rotation player as soon as game 1 of the regular season. Kuminga did a lot of bad stuff tonight, but most of it was good again. Impressive. Wiggins, efficient, and then Steph capping it off. Brilliant. The negatives, Clay, concerning, has to be. And the fact Moody just played 7 minutes, don't know where that leaves him going forward. As I said before, sounds like Steve's going to play or going to rest the main core kind of thing, so we should see plenty of minutes for Pajemski, Moody. I'm not sure, like, do we need a Kuminga rest here at some point? Like, he's playing a lot every game. I mean, he's 21. Maybe he just keeps going through and continues the growth that we've seen in him by playing another 30 minutes on Friday. Who knows? Probably going to see a little bit more Corey Joseph, I'd imagine, just to see where kind of, like, I wouldn't be surprised if Steph and CP sit again on Friday. Honestly, I know they sat against the Kings on Sunday. I just wouldn't be surprised with that, just because that would give them another look at kind of Joseph and Pajemski is in that kind of battle for the third string point guard spot. So it'll be interesting nonetheless, but it'll be less of a major dress rehearsal than what we saw tonight against the Kings. So anyway, we'll finish up there. If you've got any more thoughts, comments, opinions, whatever else, you can tweet me at POK252. That's POK252. On Twitter /X, whatever. You can keep up with my daily work on Blue Man Hoop as well. And other than that, guys, I'll see you on the next one, which will probably be another post-game live after the game against the Spurs.